In 2013, Apple released iOS 7 for all of their phones and devices, and the launch went relatively smoothly, except for the fact that a fake ad campaign was started on how the new update now made your phones waterproof. The ad said that the new update could detect when your phone was in contact with water and then disconnect and disable all the electronic components inside of your phone, essentially making it immune. Now, this of course was a blatant lie made up by the internet to try and trick a few users, and people fell for it, dunking their phones in water and causing thousands of dollars of damage. And it just sucks that Apple's warranty doesn't cover any water damages. Then, about a year later in 2014, iOS 8 rolled out, and the exact same thing happened. Except this time, instead of a trial by water, it was a trial by fire with the new Wave advertisement. The basic gist of it was that your phone's radio frequency transmitter could detect microwaves and then direct them towards the battery in the phone. Essentially, you could just pop your phone in the microwave for a few minutes and charge it up. Now, please be assured, your phone definitely can't do this. And while we know that now, that didn't stop the dozens of users who set their phones and their microwaves on fire and posed such a hazard to themselves that the authorities had to get involved to stop it. Now, there were numerous other ads like this created to try to get people to destroying their phones, some more effective than others, but at the end of the day, we could see that none of these were really out of pure malicious intent. Now, sure, many people call these jokes going way too far, and I wholeheartedly agree with them, but at the end, all that was lost were a few phones and maybe a little bit of self-respect. Now, I wouldn't be too hasty to blame these people that fell for it either. I mean, these advertisements were specifically designed to imitate Apple's, and with it just being posted and reposted all across the internet and on social media, some people genuinely thought that these were legitimate. You see, all of this stems from a very basic weakness in a system, and that is humans. Humans are susceptible to manipulation. It's been that way all throughout history, especially with modern technologies bringing communications between us to the level that they are right now. And with the internet, a brand new front has opened on taking advantage of the masses, and that is social media. The United States Securities and Exchange Commission says that Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn have all become key tools, and that, quote, fraudsters can use social media in their efforts to appear legitimate, to hide behind anonymity, and to reach as many people as possible at a low cost. You see, these people online, they try to imitate someone you trust, a friend, a coworker, your bank, anything to get you to drop your guard so that they can fish exploitable information out of you. This method, aptly named phishing, is prevalent everywhere on social media, and it tries to prey on either your greed, your curiosity, or just simply your inattentiveness, so that you can get played into giving the perpetrator whatever they want. Now, we all know about the dangers of using the internet, right? I mean, most of us do, but just knowing about the problem and a lack of genuine action towards solving it leads to complacency and ignorance of it. You see, you can have all your antivirus software and your malware protection, you can have all the safety in the world to just forget about the problem, but the human factor will always be the weakest link in the chain, and these people know that. Perpetrators online specifically target the human user using social engineering in order to take advantage of them. And again, many of us can see this coming from a mile away. We know about the problem, but just the sheer scale of how often this happens wears us down to eventually where someone gets caught. And someone will get caught. You see, the Federal Trade Commission's Consumer Sentinel Network found that in 2018, there was a 38% increase in the amount of monetary reported losses to fraud. The leading methods were imposter scams and identity theft, things that are done through phishing. Now, there were different methods of delivery, but social media was by far one of the most used. And you might be thinking that the elderly or the children might be the easiest targets, but the truth is that young adults were the ones that fell for it the most. The FTC actually emphasized that about 43% of all the reports by people between the ages of 20 and 30 had reported losses, the highest of any other demographic. These are your young adults going straight into the modern workforce. These are your entrepreneurs coming out of college. These are your brand new parents and so on. Arguably the most influential demographic on the planet gets taken advantage of the most. And for demographics that aren't as generally savvy with online tools, such as, say, the elderly, well, the situation gets a lot worse. Now, there are fewer reports from them in general, but that can simply be attributed to the fact that the elderly use online tools at a much lower rate than the rest of us. The few of them that do use it, however, fall for these kinds of ploys much harder. There is an 87.55% increase in the median value of losses encountered by those between the ages of 70 and 80. And if you go to people above the age of 80, that jumps up to over 4 times the median amount of loss. Now, these were all numbers that we got from 2018. There were 1.4 million total reports. In 2019, that jumped up to 3.2 million. Once again, imposter scams were the highest reported scam. And for now, we just need to look at the fact that $667 million were lost to just that. Now, please keep in mind that these are only the reported values. Estimates show that there are numerous people out there who are just far too embarrassed to report their victimization. But there are people out there who are being victimized. So these numbers that I presented, they're not even the full picture. And the picture gets a lot worse. In 2020, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission found that $36 million were lost in just Australia alone to these kinds of things within the first 3 months, and hundreds of millions more in the rest of the world. Now, the depravity of how people get affected gets so much darker. Now, these numbers that I showed you, they're so bad just because of the sheer scale of how often this kind of thing happens. You see, there are tens of billions of messages, posts, links, advertisements, emails, and accounts created and sent every single day. And you can have your spam filters and your Facebook settings. You can have your private accounts and your push notifications and whatever other safety in the world, but some of these will still get through. And when the machine can't detect it, it falls on the human user, the weakest link in the chain, to control what happens next. But things do get much, much darker. In rural parts of Africa, where things like getting a stable internet connection or a reliable source of information is slightly harder to come by, misinformation spreads like wildfire on their social media infrastructure. Now, it's in human nature to gossip, to tell stories, all because we evolved that way as a safety mechanism. Instead of saying, don't go into the lake, it's not safe there, we instead would tell a story on how someone from the tribe got eaten by an alligator, and it would convey the danger of the lake in a much more meaningful way. Well, during the Ebola outbreak in Africa, there was news spreading about how the government was persecuting people of certain ethnicities, or about how the testing kits were meant to poison and kill and spread the disease, things that just weren't true. And in fact, it got so bad that Mr. Nguyen, the information management coordinator for the Red Cross, said that, quote, there's an extensive phone network in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and people are using WhatsApp. There are whole groups just dedicated to talking about Ebola. He goes on to say that if you're the 5th person in a chain or the 50th, it's just not easy to check your sources. And the effects of this are deadly. People would outright refuse testing and treatment, and then once the government started enforcing it, people would refuse to give out the names of their family members or people they were in contact with or other information vital to stopping the spread of this deadly disease. Thousands of people died, and it's like we haven't even learned our lesson, because the exact same thing is happening right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, and the implications it has on our world health is a genuinely frightening thought. It's not just something that we can put an end to, because there's no one bad guy we can point the finger at. It's all of us who take part inside of this that are guilty of it. But that was a fairly extreme example, but this kind of thing happens everywhere, every single day, ranging from politics to celebrities, all because people don't check what's really true, even when they do have the resources to do so. Quickly, gossip like this just spirals out of hand and out of control and has very real consequences. What should be a 10-second fact check to realize when something just isn't true gets completely overshadowed by this massive mob mentality of people believing whatever they see at face value and then perpetuating whatever it is to all those around them, sometimes even basing actions on it. A tweet, a post, a protest, anything that can have real consequences. And it's not just something we can eliminate overnight. Once again, it's been so ingrained in our society, we've been doing it for so long, and we're all guilty of it, that it's going to take a long time and a lot of effort on all of our parts to truly solve this problem. But there is some good news. There is a ray of hope. That's that we're not at the dystopian worst case scenario just yet. It's extremely easy for someone like you or I to overcome any of these things. You just need to ignore, avoid, or verify any of these things that I mentioned, and you'll essentially stay safe. Chances are you've probably come across some of these things, but the hard part is always being vigilant. Now, somewhat ironically, there are plenty of resources out there on the internet in order to help you increase your awareness. And a large majority of people are able to navigate a large majority of problems that come their way. But still, far too many have fallen for these kinds of ploys. Now, we're teaching kids in schools about how to use online tools safely. We've been hammering it home over the news coverage, but none of that's still enough. Otherwise, the number of victims wouldn't be increasing as rapidly as it is right now. You see, we know about the problem. We've known about it for a long time, but it always ends up fading back into obscurity until another big scare, scandal, or security breach brings it back into the spotlight. The only way to truly stay safe all the time is to be alert, be up to date, and be educated. Be smart about the things that you and those around you do online, and if there's just one thing that you can leave with today, let it be this. You are more than capable of avoiding these subterfuges. Tech giants and independents have stepped up to the plate to create easily accessible resources, all for the public to utilize for free. There are thousands of articles and resources being created and published every single day, and maybe if we as a whole brought this problem off of the back burner and into the limelight, we'd see some true improvement. But the sad reality is, with the global climate right now, especially with the pandemic, things are going to get a lot worse before they get any better. Hopefully, with the plentiful tools out there, us and those around us can navigate this social media minefield just a little more safely. Thank you.